It began as nothing more than a quiet night, a few friends, and the familiar scent of burning leaves curling through the air. The man in question, a reserved and deeply introspective person, had no plans for transcendence. He had tried cannabis before, though never with any expectation beyond a gentle shift in mood. But this night was different. The moment the plant's warmth settled into his system, something opened in him, as if an invisible veil had been pulled back without warning. He closed his eyes, and was immediately pulled into a vivid, expansive realm that felt more real than anything he had ever known. He found himself standing on a shoreline where the water shimmered not with light from the sun, but with colors he couldn't name, hues that seemed to hum with intelligence. A presence emerged from the horizon, not as a figure but as a wave of consciousness that engulfed him completely. It carried a message, not in words, but in pure knowing. You have been here before. The familiarity struck him like a forgotten memory suddenly restored. Every sensation felt magnified, the air alive, the ground beneath him pulsing, even his own breath echoing through layers of reality. It was as if he had stepped into a dimension that had been waiting for him his entire life. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the dimly lit room, his friends laughing softly in the distance. But the vision had left an indelible imprint. For weeks afterward, he felt strangely altered, carrying a deep sense of connection to something vast and unseen. He could no longer dismiss cannabis as a mere plant with mild effects. To him, it had become a key, unlocking a door he didn't know existed, and yet the experience haunted him as much as it inspired him, because if that door could be opened so easily, what else could come through? His case, though remarkable in its clarity, is not unique. Across cultures, timelines, and continents, countless individuals have reported similar episodes under the influence of cannabis, sudden awakenings, visions of other realms, encounters with entities, or profound downloads of spiritual insight. For some, these moments marked the beginning of a lifelong spiritual journey. For others, they left a lingering confusion, an uncertainty about what was real and what was merely the mind under chemical influence. This is the razor's edge cannabis walks, the space between revelation and illusion. What made his vision so unsettling was the unmistakable sense of authenticity. There was nothing chaotic or disjointed about it, nothing resembling the randomness of a dream. Every detail felt intentional, as if he had been guided there by an intelligence far beyond his own. And yet, without the plant, would he have ever found that shoreline? Was it a glimpse into an actual dimension his soul knew well, or a projection of the mind heightened by altered neurochemistry? This is the paradox seekers have wrestled with for millennia, whether certain plants reveal truth or simply create convincing masks for the mind to wear. In ancient traditions, experiences like his were often treated with reverence and caution. The elders and shamans who worked with psychoactive plants understood that the worlds they opened were not to be entered lightly. Preparation was everything: the cleansing of the body, the setting of intention, the protection of spiritual space. Without these, a vision could indeed become distorted, leading not to clarity, but to entanglement in energies and impressions that had little to do with divine truth. In his case, there had been no preparation, no sacred ritual, no experienced guide, and yet the vision had arrived with force and clarity, leaving him to sort its meaning alone. In the days following, he found himself caught between two impulses. One was to return to the plant, to see if the vision could be summoned again, perhaps explored more deeply. The other was to step back, fearing that repeated use might dilute or corrupt what he had seen. He began to dream of the shoreline again, sometimes feeling as though the presence from his vision was trying to call him back. But in the waking world, doubt whispered its own questions. Could this presence be trusted? Had it been an aspect of his own higher self, or something altogether different? What is certain is that the experience altered the trajectory of his life. It drew him into study, into meditation, into conversations with mystics and healers who spoke of unseen worlds as casually as most speak of the weather. Some told him that cannabis had the ability to temporarily raise his vibrational frequency, allowing his consciousness to slip beyond the narrow range of waking perception. Others warned that such an artificial shift could create openings in his energetic field, inviting influences not all of them benevolent. Both sides spoke with conviction, and he found truth in each perspective. Over time, he came to understand that the vision's value lay not in whether it was real by the standards of waking consciousness, but in the changes it ignited within him. He began to see his daily life differently, more connected, more aware of the subtleties in people's words and energy, more attuned to the patterns playing out around him. He also became more sensitive to his own inner states, noticing how even small imbalances could cloud his perception. Cannabis had shown him something extraordinary, but it had also left him with a new responsibility, the need to discern, to protect, and to cultivate clarity without relying on any external substance. And yet, late at night, when the house was still and the world felt quiet enough to listen, he would sometimes close his eyes and remember the colors on that shoreline. He would remember the way the air itself had seemed alive, and the way the presence had filled him with the undeniable sense of having been there before. Whether it was a glimpse of a higher plane or the mind's own intricate creation, it had left him with a truth that could not be unlearned, that reality, as we know it, is far larger than we've been taught to believe. That is the power and the danger of the vision under the influence. It can awaken the soul to possibilities it never imagined, or it can entangle the mind in illusions dressed as revelations. The difference between the two is subtle, often invisible in the moment, and it is here that the real work begins, not in chasing the vision, but in learning how to meet the same depth and clarity without the need for anything beyond your own inner doorway. Because if a plant can open the door so quickly, the question remains, what is already waiting for you on the other side, and are you prepared to meet it? For as long as humanity has walked the earth, there have been plants that carry a mystery deeper than their physical form. Cannabis is one of them, a plant that has grown alongside us in deserts, mountains, and fertile valleys, weaving itself into our stories, rituals, and even our myths. In one village, it might be praised as a divine gift, a living bridge between human consciousness and the unseen realms. In another, it is whispered about in warnings, its smoke said to cloud the mind and lead the soul astray. Across centuries and continents, cannabis has earned a reputation with two faces, one bathed in sacred light, the other shadowed by caution. Long before modern culture reduced it to politics, commerce, and controversy, cannabis was a plant of the temple and the fire circle. In ancient India, wandering ascetics carried it in their satchels, using it in rituals meant to dissolve the ego and taste the divine. In old Hebrew rites, fragrant resins mixed with cannabis may have been burned in the holy incense of the inner sanctum, the smoke rising like prayers themselves. African shamans infused it into potions to open the mind before visions, while in Central Asia, nomadic tribes cast its seeds into glowing embers to commune with ancestors. Everywhere it grew, it seemed to invite humanity to step beyond ordinary perception, but always at a cost. Because that is the secret of this plant, the same doorway it opens can also close you in. Those who approach cannabis with reverence often speak of moments of deep insight, the sudden clarity of seeing life's patterns laid bare, of feeling the heartbeat of the earth itself in the rhythm of their own breath. But those who lean on it carelessly, seeking only escape, often find themselves lulled into a haze where days slip by unnoticed, where their dreams become stagnant and their will to act fades. This is why some call it sacred and others call it dangerous, because both are true depending on how the plant is met. There is an ancient saying in certain mystical traditions, "The plant will meet you where you stand. If you stand in ceremony, in intention, in humility, it will meet you in that space, offering its subtle gifts. If you stand in avoidance, in distraction, in the refusal to face your own shadow, it will amplify that too, wrapping you in a blanket that feels warm but hides you from the work your soul came here to do." In this way, cannabis does not judge, it reflects. It becomes a mirror for the consciousness of the one who uses it. This mirroring is why cannabis has been so deeply polarizing. In the right hands, under the right conditions, it can help open the gates to higher states of awareness, expanding the senses beyond their ordinary limits. A carefully prepared smoke in the stillness of the night can feel like stepping into the quiet corridors of the universe, where every sound, every sensation, and every thought carries a sacred weight. Yet, in other contexts, the same smoke can become a fog that lulls the seeker into a half-life, content with the sensation of depth, but never moving toward it. This is the plant's dual nature, the double-edged blade of its medicine. Those who revere it speak of it as a teacher, not because it lectures or instructs, but because it silently shapes the mind to receive insights that might otherwise slip past. It can soften the rigid walls of the intellect, allowing the subtle voice of intuition to be heard. It can, for some, strip away the numbing armor that life's hardships have built around the heart, letting compassion and empathy flow more freely. But like all teachers, it has its limits. Stay in its classroom too long, and it may no longer challenge you, it may simply keep you comfortable. That comfort is what many traditions warn about. The very qualities that make cannabis appealing, its ability to slow time, to make the mundane seem rich with meaning, to ease emotional strain, can also be its spiritual trap. It can offer a taste of transcendence without the work of earning it, giving the illusion of spiritual growth when, in truth, nothing has been integrated. In this way, cannabis can become a crutch, one that allows the traveler to walk but keeps them from strengthening their own legs. And if one becomes too dependent on the crutch, it can be hard to walk without it at all. In some sacred communities, this is why cannabis is approached with such deliberate care. It is not something to be taken daily, but on specific occasions, in sacred spaces, with clear purpose. The preparation of the plant, the way it is handled, and the intention set before using it, are considered just as important as the plant itself. These traditions understand that the plant's gifts are best received when the soul is ready, and that its shadow is best avoided by honoring its power. Without that respect, the line between medicine and hindrance can blur until it disappears entirely. Modern culture often misses this subtlety. In a world that prizes instant gratification, cannabis is often treated as a shortcut to relaxation or inspiration, its deeper spiritual dimensions ignored. This is where the plant's other face begins to emerge, the one that can keep a soul circling in the same patterns for years. Some find that, over time, what once opened their mind now only numbs it. The visions grow fainter, the insights less profound, until all that's left is the habit. The spiritual bridge becomes just another routine, stripped of its original sacredness. Yet, it would be a mistake to say the plant itself is to blame. Like fire, cannabis can warm or burn, it can illuminate or consume. Its true nature depends entirely on the one who holds it. Those who understand this often speak of entering into a kind of partnership with the plant, a conscious agreement about how, when, and why it will be used. In this way, it is never taken for granted, never allowed to become an unconscious reflex. It remains a tool, not a tether. In the end, cannabis remains what it has always been, a plant with two faces. It can be the smoke that rises in prayer, carrying the seeker's intention to realms unseen. It can be the haze that settles in the mind, keeping the soul comfortable in its limitations. Which face it shows you depends on the face you bring to it. And in that truth lies both the danger and the gift, the reminder that the most powerful medicine in any plant is the consciousness of the one who partakes of it. When someone inhales the smoke or takes in the oil, something subtle yet profound happens long before the mind begins to notice it. It is not simply about the change in perception or the slowing of thoughts, it is about a shift deep within the fabric of the soul's resonance. Every human being carries a unique vibrational frequency, the energetic signature that reflects the sum of their physical health, emotional state, mental clarity, and spiritual alignment. This frequency is not static, it fluctuates daily, sometimes even moment to moment, influenced by food, emotions, environment, thoughts, and yes, the substances we bring into our bodies. Cannabis, in particular, has a way of tuning that frequency, like a hand on the dial of a radio, sometimes aligning the signal more precisely, sometimes throwing it slightly off-center. The teaching that emerges from both mystical traditions and the accounts of those who have walked the plant path for years is that cannabis acts as an amplifier and a tuner, but one that works indiscriminately. If your inner field is clear, your intentions aligned, and your spiritual vessel prepared, cannabis can raise your vibration just enough to pierce the veil between ordinary perception and the subtle realms. You might sense the energy flowing through your body with more clarity, hear the whispers of intuition more distinctly, or feel the presence of something greater holding you in stillness. But if your field is clouded by unresolved emotions, heavy attachments, or chaotic thoughts, the very same shift in frequency can amplify that dissonance. Instead of seeing truth, you might find yourself swimming in a storm of distorted impressions, believing them to be insight. One of the dangers here is that frequency changes can feel intoxicating in themselves. The lift from a heavier, slower vibration into one that is lighter and more spacious can be mistaken for spiritual progress. But a temporary high vibration brought on by an external catalyst is not the same as the steady elevation earned through discipline, self-reflection, and inner work. The frequency you hold naturally, without the plant, is the foundation upon which your spiritual growth rests. When cannabis alters it, it can give you a preview of where your soul is headed, but it can also create a false sense of arrival, leading some to believe they have advanced further than they truly have. Imagine your soul's vibration as a delicate instrument. It must be tuned to resonate in harmony with the higher frequencies of truth, compassion, and divine connection. Cannabis can pluck the strings in a way that reveals hidden harmonics, giving you a glimpse of how your song might sound if played at its highest potential. This glimpse can be inspirational, motivating you to bring your everyday state closer to that elevated tone. But if you begin to rely on the plant to produce that resonance for you, the instrument risks becoming dependent on an external player. The self-mastery required to hold that frequency on your own may weaken over time, leaving you vulnerable to spiritual stagnation masked by moments of brilliance. Some traditions warn that cannabis does not merely lift frequency, it also widens it. This widening can open you to more streams of perception, both higher and lower. It's like adjusting the aperture of a camera. You let in more light, but you also let in more noise. In a well-protected, well-intentioned state, this expanded awareness can connect you to guidance, creativity, and healing energy. In an unprepared or unprotected state, it can just as easily open the door to interference from energies that are less than benevolent. These influences do not always announce themselves as harmful. They can appear as charming, persuasive, and insightful, weaving their way into your thoughts in ways that feel natural, until you realize they have led you subtly off your true path. The frequency shift is not inherently dangerous, nor is it inherently beneficial. It is neutral, like a powerful tool that responds to the hands that wield it. This is why two people can share the same dose in the same room and have utterly different experiences, one entering a profound meditation where they feel bathed in divine light, the other feeling restless, paranoid, or trapped in looping thoughts. The plant did not choose which outcome would occur. It simply interacted with the vibration each person was already holding and magnified it. There is also a timing element to this. The soul has its own rhythm of growth, a pace that unfolds according to lessons, challenges, and breakthroughs uniquely tailored to each person. If cannabis lifts the frequency too suddenly, it can flood the system with impressions and energies the person is not yet ready to integrate. This can lead to confusion, spiritual ego, or even burnout, where the mind longs for that heightened state, but the body and spirit cannot sustain it naturally. In contrast, when the soul is ready and the plant is used with sacred intention, the frequency shift can catalyze leaps in understanding, offering a boost into realms the seeker might otherwise have taken years to reach. Many mystics speak of this shift as a double-edged blessing. It can accelerate the clearing of old patterns, pulling them to the surface so they can be released. But in doing so, it may also stir up emotional storms and unresolved wounds that the person thought were long gone. If the seeker is prepared to face them with honesty and courage, the result can be a deep purification, leaving their vibration lighter and their path clearer. If they resist or become lost in the swirl of stirred-up energy, the frequency shift can leave them feeling fractured or more lost than before. The wisest approach, they say, is to treat the plant as a guest in your spiritual house, not a permanent resident. Invite it in with respect, prepare the space, and be clear about why it is there. Use the heightened vibration it offers as a point of reference, not as a place to hide. Let it show you the view from the mountain, but then do the work to climb there on your own. In this way, the The frequency shift becomes a teacher, not a trap, a reminder of what is possible when the soul vibrates in harmony with the higher currents of creation. Ultimately, cannabis reveals more about the state you are in than about the plant itself. It mirrors your inner world, magnifying the beauty and the shadows alike. And while the lift it offers can feel like the touch of the divine, the real measure of spiritual evolution lies in whether you can carry that touch into the sober light of day. Because the true goal is not to borrow a higher vibration for a few fleeting hours, but to build it, hold it, and live it, until the frequency shift is no longer something the plant gives you, but something you are. In the dust of forgotten ruins and the faded ink of ancient manuscripts, the story of cannabis as a sacred ally to the human spirit begins to emerge. Long before it became a matter of debate in courts and headlines, this plant found its place at the heart of ceremonies meant to open the human mind to the divine. It was not simply smoked for pleasure or used for medicine, it was woven into the fabric of rituals designed to bridge the worlds of matter and spirit. Across cultures, across centuries, we find evidence that cannabis was regarded not as a vice, but as a key, one that could unlock the doors to visions, prophecy, and communion with unseen realms. In the foothills of the Himalayas, wandering holy men called sadhus still carry this tradition forward. Draped in ash, eyes bright with the gleam of inner journeys, they gather in quiet circles, the smoke from clay pipes curling upward like offerings to the sky. For them, cannabis is not a distraction but a sacrament, a gift of Shiva himself, the great ascetic and destroyer of illusion. Inhaling deeply, they believe they are partaking of the divine essence, loosening the bonds of the ego so that the soul can drift closer to liberation. It is a practice, as old as the mountain paths they walk, a lineage carried through whispered teachings and shared embers. Thousands of miles away and thousands of years back, the ancient Hebrews burned incense in their holiest spaces, a blend described in sacred texts as containing a mysterious substance called cannabis. Scholars and historians have debated its identity for centuries, but evidence increasingly suggests that this was, in fact, cannabis. Mixed with resins and aromatic oils, it was burned in the inner sanctum of the temple, its fragrant smoke rising toward the ceiling like a bridge to heaven. In those sacred moments, priests would enter altered states, their minds tuned to receive visions, their hearts open to messages beyond the reach of ordinary senses. If this is true, then some of the most pivotal spiritual encounters in history may have been mediated through this plant. In the high steppes of Central Asia, nomadic tribes left behind burial mounds that tell a similar story. Archaeologists have uncovered braziers filled with charred cannabis seeds, placed alongside the remains of chieftains and shamans. The smoke was likely inhaled during funerary rites, an offering meant to guide the departed soul on its journey beyond the veil. For these tribes, cannabis was not simply part of life, it was a companion in death, a guide for crossing the invisible river to the other side. In Africa, too, the plant found sacred purpose. Among the Bantu-speaking peoples, cannabis was sometimes included in mixtures consumed by diviners and healers before entering trance states. In these altered states, they sought guidance for their communities, diagnosing illnesses, foretelling the weather, or mediating disputes. The smoke, in their view, was not just an intoxicant, it was a spirit helper, a thread connecting them to the ancestral realm. This belief, carried through oral traditions, mirrors those of shamans across the globe who saw the plant as an ally in accessing wisdom hidden from the waking mind. Even in ancient China, where the hemp plant was widely cultivated for rope, clothing, and food, there are whispers of its more mystical uses. Taoist alchemists wrote of blending cannabis with ginseng and other herbs to induce visionary states during meditation. Their aim was not escape, but enlightenment, using the plant to quiet the restless mind so the spirit could rise, free of the body's usual constraints. To them, the smoke was a tool for aligning with the Tao, the natural flow of the universe, and perceiving the hidden patterns that govern life. What unites these traditions is the recognition of cannabis as something more than a plant. Whether in the incense-filled chambers of Jerusalem, the ash-smeared gatherings of the sadhus, the burial fires of the steppes, or the secluded retreats of Taoist hermits, cannabis was treated as a sacred instrument. It was approached with intention, woven into ritual, and guarded by cultural protocols to ensure it was used in service of the soul, not the ego. The smoke was never just smoke, it was a visible sign of the invisible, a bridge between the seen and the unseen. These ancient uses point to a deeper truth about humanity's relationship with altered states. Across time and geography, there has been an intuitive understanding that the human mind has more than one mode of perception. In the waking state, we see the physical world in sharp clarity, but our access to the spiritual dimension is dimmed. In the altered state, the edges of the physical blur, and the light of the spiritual world comes through more brightly. Cannabis, in the hands of the wise, became one of the keys for shifting between these modes, a way to tune the inner receiver to frequencies that are otherwise out of reach. Of course, the ancients also understood the dangers. In many traditions, cannabis use was restricted to specific individuals, priests, shamans, initiates, who had undergone years of preparation. The plant's ability to dissolve boundaries between worlds was both a gift and a risk. Without discipline, the seeker could become lost in the visions, unable to tell true revelation from alluring illusion. This is why the plant was rarely, if ever, used casually in sacred contexts. It was a doorway to be approached with reverence, not a curtain to be pulled aside at whim. The archaeological record supports this caution. The contexts in which cannabis remains have been found, temple altars, ceremonial graves, ritual spaces, all point to its controlled, intentional use. These were not the remnants of idle pastime but of structured spiritual practice. This suggests that our ancestors understood something modern culture often forgets. The power of a tool is determined by the hands that wield it. In considering the role cannabis played in spiritual evolution, it becomes clear that it was never meant to replace the inner work of the seeker. Rather, it was used as a catalyst, a temporary ally to help the mind and spirit slip free of their usual confines and glimpse the vastness beyond. What was seen in those moments was then brought back and integrated through prayer, meditation, and community practice. Without that integration, the visions would remain hollow experiences, beautiful but fleeting. When we look at these ancient smoke temples and the ways in which they were used, we are reminded that the plant's power lies not in the substance itself, but in the intention, the ritual, and the consciousness of the one who partakes. For those who approached it with respect, cannabis was a sacred key, unlocking moments of profound connection to the divine. For those unprepared, it could be a doorway to confusion. The ancients understood both faces of this plant, and their practices were designed to honor the gift while protecting against the shadow. Perhaps the greatest lesson these traditions leave us is that sacred tools require sacred use. Cannabis was never just about the smoke, it was about what the smoke carried: prayers, visions, and the quiet courage to step into the mysteries of existence, if only for a moment, and return changed. It is one of the most seductive aspects of altered states, the feeling that you have stumbled upon a hidden truth, a revelation so clear and undeniable that it must have come from somewhere beyond yourself. In those moments, it is easy to believe you have touched the mind of God, unlocked a door to universal wisdom, or been shown the blueprint of your life's purpose. Cannabis, with its unique ability to shift perception, often brings such experiences. The mind feels illuminated, patterns reveal themselves, and the world seems to hum with meaning. Yet this is also where one of its greatest dangers lies: the inability to discern between genuine messages from the soul and elaborate projections of the subconscious dressed in the clothing of divine truth. The subconscious is a master of imagery. It stores every sight, sound, and emotion you have ever encountered, whether you consciously remember them or not. When cannabis loosens the grip of the analytical mind, these stored fragments are freed from their usual boundaries. They swirl together, forming vivid tapestries of meaning that can feel profound in the moment. Sometimes, they are profound, carrying buried wisdom that finally rises to the surface when the conscious mind relaxes enough to receive it. But just as often, they are stitched together from fears, desires, and unresolved wounds, producing visions that feel meaningful yet are colored heavily by the personal lens of your own psyche. This is why two people can experience the same shift in consciousness and emerge with entirely different truths. One may feel they have received a message of pure love from the divine, while another may see ominous signs and warnings, convinced they have glimpsed a darker fate. The difference is not necessarily in what was out there to be perceived, but in the inner landscape that was being projected outward. Cannabis has a way of turning the mind into a hall of mirrors, reflecting back your own inner contents in ways that can be either illuminating or deceiving. The challenge is that in the heightened state cannabis produces, both genuine insight and distorted projection can feel equally real. The vividness, the emotional intensity, the sense of clarity, these are hallmarks not only of spiritual revelation, but also of psychological illusion. In the moment, it is difficult to tell them apart, because the usual filters of skepticism and critical thinking have been softened. This is not inherently a bad thing. The softening of those filters is often necessary for breakthroughs. But without discernment, the seeker risks building beliefs and making life decisions based on experiences that were more about the echo of their own mind than the voice of the soul. Genuine soul messages tend to have a certain quality to them. They feel both expansive and grounded, offering insight that remains clear and useful even after the altered state fades. They are not just emotionally charged, they carry a deep resonance that continues to guide you long after the moment has passed. Distorted projections, on the other hand, often lose their power upon reflection. What seemed earth-shattering in the moment may feel vague, disjointed, or even nonsensical once the ordinary mind reasserts itself. They may provoke intense emotion, but leave no lasting clarity, only the hunger to return to the altered state to experience that intensity again. One way to understand the difference is to consider the origin of the message. The soul speaks from a place of timeless wisdom, uncolored by fear or personal agenda. Its messages, though they may challenge you, do not confuse or manipulate. The subconscious, however, is rooted in the experiences of this life and the patterns carried from others. It can be deeply wise, but it is also susceptible to distortion from unresolved emotions and ingrained beliefs. When cannabis opens the door between the conscious and subconscious, the flood that comes through is often a mix of both, the voice of the soul carried alongside the echoes of the mind. This mingling is what makes cannabis such a paradoxical spiritual tool. On one hand, it can help bypass the mental noise that keeps the soul's voice buried. On the other, it can amplify that noise until it drowns out the very guidance you hope to hear. The plant itself does not decide which you will experience. It only magnifies what is already within you, which is why preparation, intention, and inner clarity are so crucial when using it for spiritual purposes. Without them, the illusions can be so convincing that they lead you further from truth while making you believe you are walking directly toward it. The allure of the illusion lies in its emotional power. When a vision arrives with vivid colors, overwhelming love, or a sense of cosmic importance, it is tempting to believe it must be true. In fact, this is one of the oldest pitfalls in spiritual practice, mistaking intensity for authenticity. Many have chased such moments, seeking to recreate them again and again, only to find themselves caught in a cycle of diminishing returns. The first vision feels pure, the next slightly less so, and before long the seeker is left chasing shadows, mistaking the memory of light for the light itself. The real test of any insight, whether gained in an altered state or in the quiet of meditation, is in its fruit. Does it lead to greater peace, compassion, and clarity in your daily life? Does it stand the test of time, remaining true even when the heightened emotions of the moment have passed? Or does it fade into confusion, leaving you more entangled in your own mental patterns than before? These questions are not meant to diminish the beauty of altered state revelations, but to help you separate the gold from the glitter. It is important to remember that the subconscious is not the enemy. In fact, it can be a powerful ally in spiritual work, holding keys to healing and transformation that the conscious mind cannot reach on its own. The issue is not that cannabis allows the subconscious to speak, but that it does so without the usual filters, meaning its voice may be amplified in ways that feel like divine truth even when they are not. This is why grounding practices, integration work, and sober reflection are essential companions to any spiritually oriented use of the plant. Without them, the line between soul message and subconscious projection remains dangerously thin. In the end, the illusion of insight is not meant to be feared, but respected. It is a reminder that not everything that shines in the altered state is light from the source. Some of it is the sparkle of your own unprocessed history, refracted through the lens of a temporarily expanded mind. Learning to tell the difference is part of the path, perhaps the most important part. Because the deeper truth is that your soul's wisdom is always present, with or without the plant. Cannabis may open a door, but the real journey begins when you step through it with your eyes open, willing to see not only the visions that inspire you but also the shadows that would mislead you. Only then can you move beyond illusion into the clarity that no substance can give, the clarity that comes from the steady, unwavering light of your own awakened spirit. There is a kind of debt that does not show up on paper, one that no banker can calculate and no law can collect. It is an invisible tally that is kept not in the material world, but in the subtle layers of the self, the places where the body and soul exchange energy. This is the debt that builds when the mind comes to rely too heavily on a physical aid to reach a higher state of being. With cannabis, this is not about chemical dependence in the way science might measure it. It is about the quiet, gradual shift in the soul's own abilities. What begins as a tool to open the door to expanded consciousness can, over time, become the very reason that door will not open without it. When someone first uses cannabis intentionally, they may be struck by the ease with which the boundaries of the ordinary mind seem to dissolve. Thoughts flow freely, creativity bursts into bloom, and moments feel infused with significance. It can be intoxicating in more ways than one, not only for the sensations themselves, but for the taste of a reality that feels bigger, more connected, more alive. And yet, beneath the surface of these experiences, something subtle begins to happen. The mind starts to associate that expansive state with the plant. The body starts to expect the plant's influence before letting go of its normal constraints. The spirit, which is capable of traveling beyond the limits of waking perception on its own, begins to wait for an external signal to do so. This is where the subtle debt begins to form. Every time the plant is used in place of the soul's own effort, the balance shifts slightly. The inner muscles of consciousness, the ones that stretch in meditation, prayer, breathwork, or deep contemplation, are given less work to do, and like any muscle that is not used, they weaken. This weakening is rarely noticed at first, because the plant continues to provide the desired state. But over months, years, or decades, the soul may find that it struggles to enter those same depths without the familiar smoke, no matter how much it wants to. The tool becomes a crutch, and the crutch becomes a quiet chain. This is not to say that the plant has ill intent. A key is not to blame when someone refuses to learn how to open a door without it. But the human tendency to take the easier path is strong, and cannabis offers a very easy path to sensations and perceptions that normally require effort to cultivate. Without realizing it, the seeker may trade the slow, steady development of their own inner capacities for the instant opening the plant provides. And while the opening is real, it is also borrowed. The moment the plant is removed, the space it opened may feel locked once again, the mind restless and frustrated without its aid. This dependency is energetic in nature, and it lingers in ways that are not always obvious. The more the body and mind are conditioned to expect the plant's presence before entering certain states, the more the energy pathways of the subtle body align themselves with that expectation. Over time, it can create a sort of groove in the field, a habit not only of thought but of vibration. The soul learns to reach for the plant's frequency rather than generating it from within. This is the true cost of the subtle debt, the loss of sovereignty over one's own spiritual states. In some spiritual traditions, there is a belief that each soul is meant to master certain states of consciousness without any external assistance. The discipline it takes to enter those states builds a kind of strength and clarity that is itself part of the lesson. If a soul continually bypasses that lesson by leaning on a substance, the growth may slow or even pause. This does not mean the soul stops evolving entirely, but the path can become narrower, looping through familiar sensations instead of moving forward into unknown depths. This looping feels comfortable because it is predictable. The plant delivers the same shift, again and again, but comfort is not the same as growth. The debt can also show itself in the way the soul responds to other spiritual practices. Someone who has used cannabis regularly for altered states may find meditation without it to be dull, uninspiring, or even agitating. They may lose patience with slower methods, feeling that they are less effective. This is the subtle rewiring of expectation. The mind has learned to anticipate quick, dramatic openings, and so the gentle, gradual unfolding of natural practice feels insufficient. In this way, the plant can unintentionally train the seeker to dismiss the very tools that would have strengthened their own inner connection. Breaking free from this kind of dependency is not simply a matter of willpower. It often requires a period of reconditioning, where the soul relearns how to enter deep states on its own. At first, these states may feel faint or fleeting compared to the vividness brought on by the plant, but with patience and persistence, the natural abilities begin to return. The energy pathways that had grown accustomed to the plant's vibration can be cleared and retrained, like overgrown trails being walked again until they are open and easy to follow. In the broader view, the subtle debt is not a punishment. It is simply a natural consequence of the choices made over time. Every spiritual tool has the potential to create it if overused. The difference with cannabis is that its effects are both accessible and profound, making it particularly tempting to rely on. But the same qualities that make it tempting also make it a potent teacher. By showing how easily one can become attached to a source outside themselves, it can point the seeker back toward the truth that the source was never truly outside to begin with. In this light, the debt can even be seen as part of the lesson. When the seeker finally sets the plant aside and struggles to reach the same heights, they are reminded of their own responsibility in the process. They are forced to cultivate the inner stillness, the focused intention, and the disciplined practice that the plant once provided instantly. And when they succeed, the experience is often deeper and more lasting than any that came from the smoke, because it was earned from within. The plant, in its own way, does not object to this. Those who approach it with respect often speak of feeling its presence as a guide, even when they no longer consume it. Its gift, perhaps, is not only the states it can open, but the awareness of what is possible when the boundaries of the mind are loosened. Once the seeker knows those states exist, they can work toward them without the plant, repaying the subtle debt and reclaiming their sovereignty. In the end, the subtle debt is not a chain meant to bind forever, but a quiet reminder that every shortcut has its price. The soul's natural ability to soar is still there, waiting, like a bird whose wings have been folded too long. The moment the seeker chooses to stretch those wings again, they will remember that the sky has always been theirs. The plant may have opened the first window, but it is the soul that must learn to fly through it. There are stories whispered in small spiritual circles, often spoken with a mixture of awe and caution, about what happens when the doorway opened by cannabis refuses to close. These are not tales of blissful awakenings or gentle communion with the unseen. They are accounts of people who stepped too far, too often, into realms they did not fully understand, only to find that the bridge between worlds had become a permanent fixture in their lives. At first, the idea of a gateway staying open might sound like a gift, an unending connection to higher knowledge or spiritual perception. But for those who have lived it, the reality is far more complex, and in some cases, deeply unsettling. One woman, a meditation teacher in her early 40s, began incorporating cannabis into her nightly practice to deepen her trance states. At first, it worked beautifully. Her visions became sharper, her intuition more precise, and her sense of guidance stronger than ever. But after several months of consistent use, she noticed something odd. Even on nights when she abstained, the visions came unbidden. At first, this seemed like proof of progress, as if the heightened state had become her new normal. Then the visitors began to arrive. She would wake in the night to feel a presence in the room, sometimes benevolent, other times radiating a cold, watchful energy. Her dreams were no longer her own. She found herself in places she didn't choose to visit, hearing voices that spoke in riddles or offered cryptic warnings. What she came to understand, with no small amount of dread, was that her field had been left open. The shift in frequency that cannabis had initiated never fully reset. The energetic protections she used to rely on in meditation felt thin, as if her boundaries had been worn down by repeated crossings. And once the gateway was unguarded, not everything that entered had her best interests at heart. Another case involved a man who was deeply committed to exploring altered states in search of healing from his childhood trauma. He used cannabis daily, often in large amounts, pairing it with breathwork and ceremonial rituals. Over time, he began to notice that his emotional triggers seemed magnified, surfacing without warning in the middle of the day. But more than that, he began to sense other minds, thoughts that were not his own, drifting into his awareness. At first, they were gentle nudges, ideas that seemed helpful. Then they became more insistent, even intrusive, pressing him toward decisions that felt strangely out of character. He described it as if his consciousness had become a public square where anyone could step in and speak. The more he tried to resist, the stronger the intrusions became. Such accounts reveal an uncomfortable truth, that the worlds cannabis can open are not all filled with light. When used repeatedly without adequate energetic grounding, the plant can loosen the borders between the self and the unseen in ways that leave the individual exposed. In esoteric traditions, there is a reason rituals of closing and sealing are taken as seriously as the opening. Without them, the gateway remains a revolving door, and the seeker becomes a host to whatever energies or entities happen to wander through. For some, this open state manifests as a constant psychic sensitivity. They begin to pick up on the emotions and thoughts of others with unnerving accuracy, unable to turn the volume down. Crowded places become unbearable, sleep is restless, and solitude is no longer peaceful because the intrusion is coming from within. Others find themselves in an ongoing state of dream bleed, where visions and waking life blur until they can no longer tell which is which. This might sound mystical, but in practice it can be disorienting to the point of emotional breakdown. One healer who had worked with such individuals explained it simply: cannabis can train the consciousness to hover between realms, but without proper closure, it can forget how to return fully. In this liminal state, the mind remains partially attuned to frequencies that were meant to be accessed only temporarily. While this can produce flashes of extraordinary insight, it can also invite what she called energetic hitchhikers, influences that attach themselves subtly, feeding on emotional energy or planting thoughts that skew the person's perception over time. The most chilling cases are those in which the person is unaware that interference is occurring. They believe their choices, beliefs, and insights are fully their own, not realizing that subtle external impressions have been shaping them for weeks or months. This is not always malevolent in the overt sense. Sometimes it's simply a drift, a quiet deviation from one's true path, so gradual that the person never sees it happening until they feel far from themselves. In these cases, the open gateway becomes not a tool for exploration, but a channel of manipulation. Those who have experienced this often speak of the difficulty of closing the door once it has been left ajar for too long. Cleansing rituals, protective visualizations, fasting, and long periods of abstinence from any altered state can help, but the process is rarely immediate. It is like retraining a muscle that has forgotten its original function, the ability to hold one's own vibration steady and impenetrable. Some never fully regain the boundaries they once had, learning instead to manage the open state by strengthening their discernment and surrounding themselves with protective energies. The lesson in all of this is not that cannabis is inherently dangerous, but that it operates on a scale of spiritual power that demands respect. Just as a skilled diver knows to return to the surface slowly to avoid injury, a spiritual seeker must know how to return fully to their own energetic baseline after visiting expanded states. Without that return, the subtle body can remain stretched thin, vulnerable to interference from realms that are best approached only when invited, and only when the seeker is fully prepared. Perhaps the most sobering truth is that not every intrusion is obvious. It may not arrive as a frightening vision or an oppressive presence in the night. Sometimes it comes as a gentle shift in motivation, a gradual erosion of willpower, or an uncharacteristic apathy toward one's spiritual disciplines. These influences can be far more effective than overt attack because they work quietly, weaving themselves into the fabric of daily thought until they feel natural. The open gateway does not always roar, sometimes it whispers. And those whispers can alter the trajectory of a life more than any loud demand. For those who have faced this and found their way back, the most consistent advice is clear. Set boundaries before entering any altered state, and honor the closing as much as the opening. Treat the unseen world as you would a foreign land, beautiful to visit, but not a place to live without knowing the laws that govern it. And above all, remember that just because a door can be opened does not mean it should remain that way. In the vast and intricate architecture of the soul, there are rooms meant to be locked when not in use. Cannabis can hand you the keys, but it is up to you to decide which doors to leave ajar and which to guard with all the strength and wisdom you have. There is a quiet hum that exists between the physical body and the luminous form that inhabits it, a connection that ancient mystics called the silver cord. This cord is not made of anything material, yet it is more vital than bone or blood, for it is the tether that binds the soul to the flesh during life. The astral body, that subtle double of ourselves, moves along this tether. It is the traveler in dreams, the one who roams when the body sleeps. Some traditions claim that certain plants can affect the tension in this connection, making it easier for the astral body to drift beyond the limits of the skin. Cannabis, according to these teachings, is one such plant. It loosens the weave just enough for the traveler within to slip free, but every opening carries both a gift and a risk. Those who have experienced this loosening often describe it as a strange lightness, as if the edges of their body no longer match perfectly with the flesh they inhabit. The room may feel more vivid, almost hyper-real, or conversely, strangely distant, as though seen through a layer of clear water. Thoughts drift faster, connections form with unusual speed, and sensations seem magnified. Beneath these changes, the astral body is stretching, testing the space between itself and its earthly vessel. In this state, leaving the body is not a matter of years of disciplined training but a possibility that may happen spontaneously. A simple meditative focus, a wandering daydream, or even the shift between waking and sleeping can suddenly become the doorway to another plane. For the seeker who longs to explore beyond the physical world, this can be intoxicating. The astral realms are not bound by the same rules as the material one. Distances collapse, thoughts become vehicles, and one can step into landscapes formed from memory, imagination, or shared consciousness. Encounters in this space can feel more real than waking life, carrying insights and emotional truths that linger long after returning. Cannabis, when used in this context, can act as a catalyst, an accelerant that lowers the barrier to entry and allows even the untrained to taste the freedom of leaving the body. Yet, the very ease of this departure is what makes it dangerous. The astral body is not wandering through a neutral void. It is moving through layers of existence that are populated with other forms of life, some luminous and benevolent, others drawn to the warmth of a traveler's energy for less pure reasons. In the ordinary course of dreaming or meditation, the tether to the body remains firm, the traveler's focus anchored by the subconscious mind. When cannabis loosens that anchor, even subtly, the astral body can drift farther than the seeker knows how to navigate. And while most journeys pass without incident, there are times when the openness attracts what might be called energetic hitchhikers, presences that feed on attention, fear, or the light of awareness itself. These encounters can range from fleeting and harmless to deeply unsettling. Some may awaken from a cannabis-fueled dream feeling drained, heavy, or strangely uneasy, unable to shake the sense that they were not entirely alone. Others report a lingering fog that persists for days, as if part of them has not fully returned. In more extreme cases, the vulnerability created by repeated loosening of the astral body without proper grounding can lead to disturbances in sleep, mood, or energy levels, all symptoms of a subtle imbalance between the physical and the non-physical self. This is why traditions that recognized cannabis as an astral aid often paired its use with protective rituals. In some circles, Sacred symbols were drawn around the space before smoking. Mantras were repeated to seal the traveler in light, and experienced guides remained present to oversee the journey. The intention was never merely to drift but to navigate, to know the destination and return fully intact. The plant was treated as a key to a door that should never be left open without a guardian at the threshold. From an energetic perspective, the loosening effect of cannabis can be understood as a temporary softening of the auric field. The layers of subtle energy that usually form a cohesive shield become more porous, allowing perception to extend outward, but also making it easier for external influences to seep in. For a practiced traveler, this can be an opportunity to explore new dimensions of awareness. For someone unprepared, it can feel like walking through unfamiliar streets with every door unlocked. The astral body itself is highly responsive to thought and emotion, and cannabis tends to amplify both. This means that whatever mindset the traveler brings into the experience will likely shape the journey. Fear can manifest as threatening forms, while love and curiosity can draw luminous encounters. In this way, cannabis acts as a magnifier of the inner state, and the astral plane reflects that magnification back. Without self-awareness, a traveler may project unconscious fears into the environment, and then react as though they are encountering something external. This feedback loop can quickly spiral into disorientation. The other danger of repeated cannabis use for astral travel is that it can create a reliance on the plant to access these states. The soul, capable of lifting itself through natural practices like breathwork, focused intention, and deep meditation, may come to believe it needs the plant to loosen the tether. Over time, this belief can dull the natural sensitivity that allows for safe, deliberate astral movement without aids. The dependency is not only physical or mental but energetic. The body's own systems begin to wait for the plant's influence before making the shift. Still, there is no denying that when approached with reverence, cannabis can be a powerful tool for exploring the astral realms. Those who combine it with grounding practices often report journeys of profound insight, encounters with guides or ancestors, and visions that alter the course of their waking lives. The difference lies in preparation and intention. A traveler who clears their mind, sets a clear purpose, surrounds themselves with protective energy, and grounds themselves upon return, is far less likely to experience the negative effects of openness. Ultimately, cannabis and the astral body share a delicate relationship. The plant can act as a skilled locksmith, opening the door between the physical and the subtle with ease. But the door it opens is not a toy. It is an entryway into vast and unpredictable territories. Those who step through without preparation may find more than they bargained for, while those who step through with respect may find the journey life-changing. The silver cord remains unbroken as long as life continues, but its tension, its elasticity, and the readiness of the traveler are all factors that determine the safety of the passage. Cannabis can make that cord feel longer, lighter, more fluid. Whether that freedom becomes a blessing or a liability depends entirely on the awareness and discipline of the one holding the key. And in the realm of the astral, where thought shapes reality in an instant, the most important safeguard is not the plant, but the mind that wields it. Karma is not the punishing hand so many fear, it is the weaving loom of cause and effect, endlessly stitching the threads of your actions, intentions, and awareness into the fabric of your soul's ongoing journey. Every choice you make, no matter how small, sends ripples forward, not just into the days and years of your current life, but into the pattern of lives yet to come. Cannabis, like any tool that alters consciousness, is not exempt from this weaving. Its influence does not end when the smoke clears or the sensation fades. If used without care, it can embed subtle imprints into the soul's energetic field, imprints that do not dissolve with the body at death but travel forward, shaping the conditions you will meet in your next incarnation. What determines whether those imprints become blessings or burdens is not simply the plant itself, but how you approached it. In the eyes of karmic law, intention is the seed, action is the planting, and awareness is the tending of what grows. If cannabis is used with reverence, moderation, and a sincere aim towards spiritual expansion, the karmic ripple it creates can be one of refinement. The insights gained in those moments can carry forward, making you more receptive to guidance in your next life, perhaps even creating an early openness to meditation, creativity, or subtle perception. The soul remembers states of being even when the conscious mind cannot, and those memories can act like dormant seeds waiting to sprout in a more prepared lifetime. But the karmic ledger is not swayed only by what is sought, it is also shaped by what is avoided, denied, or misused. If cannabis becomes an escape, a way to bypass the discomfort of facing oneself, the karmic imprint is different. Instead of planting seeds of clarity, it plants seeds of avoidance, weaving a pattern in which the next life may present even greater challenges in focus, discipline, and truth-telling to oneself. The soul is always seeking balance, and if an experience tips too far toward illusion or dependency, the pendulum swings the other way in a future incarnation to restore equilibrium. There are also karmic threads tied to moderation. Using the plant occasionally, in moments of deep intention, may create a soft echo that the soul can integrate easily. But repeated overuse without proper grounding can etch deeper grooves into the soul's vibration, grooves that can carry over, attracting circumstances in the next life that mirror the energetic patterns you reinforced. A soul accustomed to external alteration of consciousness may find itself drawn, in another life, to substances or experiences that mimic that state, even without understanding why. What feels like an inexplicable attraction or habit in one lifetime can be the direct echo of repeated actions in another. Awareness is the compass in this process. Many think that karma is built only from action, but the inner state during the action is equally powerful. Someone may partake in cannabis with full mindfulness, honoring its effect, observing its impact on their energy, and closing the experience with gratitude and reflection. Another may consume the same amount in the same setting, but without presence, drifting unconsciously through the altered state. The karmic resonance is not the same. Awareness aligns the act with the soul's growth, while unconsciousness deepens the veil between the self and its own truth. Some karmic teachings speak of energetic residue, the lingering subtle impressions of strong experiences. With cannabis, especially when used in altered state work, this residue can take the form of shifts in perception, mood, or energetic openness that last beyond the session. If integrated well, these shifts can strengthen your connection to your higher self. But if ignored or misinterpreted, they can lead to confusion, attachment to altered states, or even a loss of grounding in the physical world. That residue, carried unresolved into the next incarnation, may manifest as difficulty fully inhabiting the body, feeling scattered in thought, or being unusually sensitive to energetic influence without knowing how to manage it. The karmic factor is not simply about punishment or reward, it is about momentum. Whatever direction you set in motion with your actions, your intention, and your awareness, the soul will continue to follow until a conscious choice redirects it. This is why one lifetime's habits can so easily feel like fate in the next. A person who repeatedly used cannabis to deepen spiritual practice might find themselves born with an innate sense of the unseen, a natural curiosity about meditation, or a mysterious comfort in liminal states. A person who used it primarily to numb pain might be born into circumstances that confront them with similar emotional wounds, this time stripped of the familiar escape, forcing them to develop the tools they once avoided. There are also cases in which the karmic link is collective rather than individual. Shared use of the plant in a group setting, whether ceremonial or casual, can weave threads that bind those souls together in future lives. These bonds may bring the same people together again to continue the work they began, or to resolve the imbalances they created together. In this way, cannabis can be part of a larger karmic tapestry, connecting not just individual choices, but the shared intentions and energies of an entire circle. For those who sense the weight of karma in their spiritual journey, the key is to remember that the ledger is never fixed. The patterns you have set in motion can be shifted through conscious effort, even if they have been reinforced for years. If past use of cannabis feels misaligned in retrospect, the karmic threads it created can be balanced through acts of clarity, discipline, and service in the present. The soul responds not to guilt, but to the redirection of energy toward harmony. In the same way, if you have used the plant in ways that felt deeply aligned, you can strengthen that karmic momentum by continuing to cultivate the qualities it revealed, without becoming dependent on the plant to access them. The goal is not to recreate the altered state, but to integrate the insights it brought into the everyday rhythm of your life. By doing so, you ensure that the karmic ripple is one of steady expansion, carrying forward not just a memory of illumination, but the living embodiment of it. Ultimately, the karmic factor reminds us that every encounter with a tool of transformation is part of a much larger story. Cannabis is not simply something you try, enjoy, or abstain from in this one brief lifetime. It is a thread in the weaving of your soul's eternal garment. How you spin that thread, what color you give it, and whether it strengthens the fabric or weakens it, is entirely in your hands. And the hands that hold it now will be the same hands, in different form, that take it up again in lives yet to come. This is why intention, moderation, and awareness are not optional when it comes to such a potent ally. They are the difference between a karmic gift and a karmic debt, between a pattern that lifts you and one that binds you. In the long arc of the soul's journey, that difference can mean lifetimes. There is a vast difference between approaching a thing as sacred and treating it as casual. That difference is not only in the way it is used, but in the way it shapes the one who uses it. Cannabis, perhaps more than most plants, reveals this divide with striking clarity. In sacred use, it becomes a bridge, an ally that helps the soul reach deeper into the realms of truth, insight, and connection. In casual use, it can become a loop, a cycle that numbs, distracts, and quietly robs the soul of its own power. Both involve the same plant, but the path they lead to could not be more different. Sacred use begins long before the plant touches the lips or enters the lungs. It begins with intention, the conscious act of deciding why this moment is worthy of opening the doorway between worlds. In the hands of the mystic, the shaman, or the seeker, cannabis is not taken on a whim. It is prepared in stillness, often in a space that has been cleansed and blessed. The person enters into a silent agreement with themselves and with the plant, that this moment will be treated with reverence, that the journey ahead will be approached with humility, and that whatever truths emerge will be honored. This mental and emotional preparation sets a vibration in motion, tuning the body and spirit to a frequency that can receive more than sensation, it can receive wisdom. In ceremonial use, everything is deliberate. The environment is chosen for its safety and harmony, perhaps surrounded by symbols of the sacred, candles, or incense. There may be words spoken aloud, calling on guidance or protection. There may be music or chanting designed to guide the mind into deeper states. And when the plant is consumed, it is done with awareness. The breath is slow, the senses alert, the heart open. This is the space in which cannabis reveals its higher face. Here, the visions it stirs are not random, they are messages. The emotions it awakens are not simply moods, they are lessons. The body feels lighter, the mind quieter, and the connection to the unseen sharper. In this kind of sacred setting, the plant acts as a collaborator rather than a controller. The soul still does its own work. The plant is there to amplify, to illuminate, to smooth the path, but the seeker remains aware that the power lies within themselves, not in the smoke. Often, the experience is followed by integration, time spent reflecting on what was felt and seen, perhaps writing it down, perhaps discussing it with a trusted guide. The goal is always transformation, not just experience. Sacred use is not about escape, it is about engagement with the deepest levels of being. Casual use, on the other hand, tends to bypass all of this. It begins with no intention beyond a temporary change in state. There is no preparation, no cleansing of space, no calling in of protection or guidance. The plant is consumed the way one might eat a snack or pour a drink, casually, perhaps even absent-mindedly. The setting may be chaotic, distracting, or energetically heavy. The mind is not open to receive wisdom, it is dulled to avoid discomfort. In this space, the plant shows its other face. It soothes without challenging, entertains without enlightening, relaxes without revealing. The danger of this pattern is subtle. At first, it may seem harmless, a moment of calm at the end of a long day, a way to feel lighter, happier, less burdened. But over time, casual use begins to train the soul to seek external relief for internal unrest. The difficult emotions that might have sparked self-reflection are softened into the background. The restless mind that might have been driven to meditate is quieted without the discipline. The insights that might have emerged through natural effort remain untouched because the plant offers the sensation of progress without the work. This is how the soul's evolution can slow, not in dramatic collapses but in the quiet erosion of the will to grow. Recreational use often reinforces the illusion of connection rather than the reality of it. The laughter shared among friends, the feeling of unity, the sudden fascination with simple things, these can all be genuine pleasures. But without the guiding structure of sacred use, they rarely deepen into lasting transformation. When the high fades, the mind and heart return to their original state, unchanged. And because the plant provided temporary relief, the deeper causes of unrest or stagnation remain untouched, waiting for another day that never comes. In many ancient traditions, the difference between sacred and casual use was not merely cultural, it was a spiritual law. The plant was considered a gift from the divine, not to be wasted on idle moments. The idea was not to restrict pleasure, but to protect the plant's potency in the mind of the user. When cannabis was only consumed in ceremony, its effects retained a sense of awe and gravity. The altered state was understood as an entry into sacred time, a period outside the ordinary flow of life in which the soul could move more freely. Casual use erodes this sense of sacredness. When every day becomes a doorway, the threshold loses its meaning. The impact on the soul is the most striking difference. Sacred use strengthens the inner muscles of awareness. The seeker learns how to navigate altered states, how to receive guidance, how to ground themselves after travel. They carry the lessons into waking life, applying them to their relationships, their work, their purpose. Casual use, in contrast, can weaken those muscles. The altered state becomes a comfortable escape rather than a challenge to grow. The lessons are fleeting, if they appear at all, and are rarely integrated. Over years, this can lead to a spiritual stagnation in which the soul circles the same terrain without realizing it. The distinction is not about moral judgment, it is about energetic consequence. The plant itself holds the same potential in every context, but the way it is approached shapes the way it responds. Sacred use tunes the individual into alignment with that potential. Casual use leaves it dormant, overshadowed by habit and distraction. The soul, ever adaptable, will shape itself around whichever pattern is repeated. There is a story told in some circles about a traveler who found a golden key. In his excitement, he began using the key to open small boxes and cupboards, enjoying the little treasures he found. But the key was not meant for those things. It was meant to open a great door at the edge of his village, a door that led to a garden beyond imagining. Because he never used the key for its true purpose, he never knew the garden was there. Cannabis is like that key. In sacred use, it opens the great door. In casual use, it opens the same small boxes again and again until the soul forgets there was ever anything more. In the end, the plant does not choose for you. It waits to be met with the energy you bring to it. Approach it with reverence, and it will lift you. Approach it without awareness, and it will simply meet you where you are. The difference in those two paths is not only the difference between sacred and casual use, it is the difference between moving forward in the journey of the soul and standing still in the illusion of motion. There comes a point in every seeker's path where the question must shift from, "What can this do for me?" to, "What is this doing to me?" Cannabis, like any force that can alter the mind and expand perception, is neither saint nor villain on its own. Its value, or its danger, lies entirely in the relationship you form with it. To discern whether it is a tool, a distraction, or an obstacle in your spiritual evolution, you have to turn your gaze inward with a rare kind of honesty, the kind that is willing to cut through comforting illusions. This is the essence of the inner compass test, not relying on other people's rules or cultural narratives, but feeling for the truth in your own being. The first question of the inner compass is about intention. Ask yourself, with no poetic excuses, why you are using cannabis. Is it to reach a state of mind that helps you listen more clearly to your soul, or is it to avoid the noise of your unhealed thoughts? A tool elevates your consciousness, a distraction numbs it. If you find that your use comes most often in moments when you want to escape discomfort rather than grow through it, your compass is already giving you a warning. Cannabis, in that case, is not acting as an ally, but as a buffer between you and the lessons your soul is trying to bring into view. The second question is about dependency, and it is deceptively simple. If cannabis were taken from you tomorrow, how much of your spiritual practice would remain? Would you still meditate? Would you still feel connected? Would you still seek truth? A spiritual tool is something you can set down at will without losing your alignment. A spiritual obstacle is something that convinces you it is the source of the connection itself. If you notice resistance rising even at the thought of stopping, that is a sign the plant may be holding more of your spiritual architecture than it should. Your inner compass also asks you to examine the quality of the insights you receive under its influence. Do they lead to consistent, grounded action in your waking life, or do they remain as beautiful but empty visions that fade within hours? A true tool will give you revelations that integrate, that transform the way you live, not just the way you feel in the moment. A distraction gives you the sensation of growth without the substance of it, leaving you in the same patterns week after week, while convincing you that you are evolving. Another measure is in your energetic clarity. Pay attention to how your mind and body feel in the days after using cannabis. Are you sharper, calmer, more open-hearted? Or do you feel foggy, unmotivated, or subtly detached from the world around you? A plant spirit that is serving your highest good will leave you with an afterglow of alignment, like a path freshly cleared. One that is becoming an obstacle will leave energetic residue that blurs your focus or weakens your resolve. The compass here is not in abstract philosophy, it is in the daily, physical reality of your life. It is also essential to watch the balance between cannabis and your other spiritual practices. If you meditate, journal, or pray only when cannabis is part of the ritual, that imbalance tells you something. A true tool enhances what already exists within you, it does not replace it. If you notice that without it, your discipline crumbles, you have shifted from working with the plant to leaning on it. The danger is that over time, your own inner channels grow weaker from disuse, making it harder to access spiritual states without assistance. The inner compass test is not about moral judgment, it is about alignment with your soul's next steps. There are times in a seeker's journey when cannabis can be an extraordinary ally, unlocking a door that has been rusted shut, showing you a glimpse of a higher landscape so that you know it is real. But once you have seen that landscape, the work is to learn how to reach it on your own. If you keep returning to the same door over and over without building the inner path to it, the plant stops being a guide and becomes a gatekeeper, holding you in the threshold instead of helping you pass through. Another key question is whether your relationship with cannabis is expanding or narrowing your sense of possibility. Does it make you curious, inspired, willing to take new steps in your growth? Or does it keep you in a predictable loop of experiences that, while pleasant, no longer challenge you? The soul does not come here to orbit endlessly in comfort, it comes to expand. When a tool ceases to open new ground, it risks becoming a soft prison, one lined with the familiar images and sensations you've grown attached to. A subtle but telling part of the compass test is your emotional response to times of clarity without the plant. If you feel relief, lightness, or a deeper connection in its absence, that is your soul signaling that it wants more space. If you feel anxious, restless, or creatively blocked, it could mean you've allowed the plant to carry a part of your vitality that you now need to reclaim. The point is not to demonize those feelings, but to read them as the data they are. Your soul speaks in these currents of emotion, nudging you toward balance if you're willing to listen. It is also worth asking whether your relationship with cannabis feels sacred or casual. Sacred use has rituals, boundaries, and a clear purpose. It is not about frequency, it is about reverence. Casual use, even if frequent, can sometimes be aligned, but more often, it slips into the unconscious, where you are no longer truly present to the exchange taking place between your spirit and the plants. The inner compass is sensitive to the difference between honoring a tool and simply consuming it. In truth, the inner compass test never ends. The answer to whether cannabis is a tool, distraction, or obstacle will change as you change. What served you well for a season may no longer be needed in the next, and something that once clouded your path might, in a moment of readiness, become the very lens that clarifies your vision. The key is not to cling to a fixed identity about your use, but to return again and again to the questions that reveal how it is shaping you in the present. If you can stand in that kind of honesty with yourself, you won't need anyone else to tell you what is right for your path. You will feel it. You will know when the plant is opening you, and when it is holding you back. And in that knowing, you reclaim your authority, not just over your choices in this lifetime, but over the karmic ripples those choices will send into lifetimes yet to come. The plant's spirit may offer you a key, but it is your inner compass that decides which doors you unlock, and which you leave closed in honor of your own becoming. There comes a point for many when the quiet inner voice can no longer be ignored, the sense that the mind feels cluttered, the emotions heavier than they should be, and the connection to something higher dimmed to a flicker. For some, this realization comes after years of leaning on substances like cannabis without intention, slowly recognizing that while the body may function and the day-to-day continues, the soul feels as though it is wrapped in gauze. This is the call to detox, not only in the physical sense, but in the spiritual. Cleansing the spirit is an act of clearing the fog from the inner mirror, restoring the light that has always been there but has become muted beneath layers of energetic residue. Spiritual detox begins with recognition. Without judgment, you acknowledge that the clarity you once felt is no longer as sharp, that moments of inspiration are harder to reach, and that the sense of ease in meditation or prayer is less immediate. This acknowledgement is powerful because it breaks the first illusion, the belief that nothing has changed. It is only when you name the imbalance that you can begin to shift it. In this space, you start to see the misuse for what it is, not as a moral failing, but as a pattern that has left its mark on your energy field. The energetic body holds impressions much the way the physical body stores toxins. Repeated use of cannabis without sacred intention can leave the auric field sluggish, the flow of energy muted. Where once inspiration could move freely, there may now be static. Where emotional release once came naturally, there may now be a weight that resists movement. Spiritual detox is about restoring that movement, opening the channels so light can circulate again. It is less about deprivation and more about reintroducing the soul to its own vitality. One of the most powerful tools for this is breath. Conscious, intentional breathing is the bridge between body and spirit, and it can flush the subtle body in ways that mimic the cleansing of a running stream. Deep, rhythmic breathing, practiced daily, invites fresh energy into the body while expelling the stagnant. On the inhale, you imagine drawing in light from a limitless source above, letting it fill every cell. On the exhale, you see that light carrying away the residue of past use, the haze, the heaviness, the patterns you are ready to release. Over time, this simple act rewires the body's natural rhythm of energetic exchange, reminding it that altered states are possible without external aids. Alongside breath, fasting can be a potent spiritual reset. This is not simply about abstaining from food, but about giving the body and spirit a period of quiet in which their natural repair systems can work without interruption. In many traditions, short fasts are paired with prayer or meditation, allowing the seeker to shift their awareness inward and heighten their receptivity to subtle impressions. Even a single day of mindful fasting, accompanied by water and intention, can bring the first stirrings of renewed clarity. Water itself is another ally in detoxing the spirit, not only in the form of drinking but in bathing and immersion. A salt bath, prepared with natural sea salt, has been used in countless cultures to cleanse the energy body as well as the physical. When you soak in water infused with salt, you can imagine the crystal structure pulling out stagnant energies, returning your field to a clearer vibration. Some combine this with prayer, blessing the water before entering, so that the very molecules carry the imprint of healing and renewal. But perhaps the most transformative element of spiritual detox is time spent in nature. The earth, untouched and living, has an extraordinary ability to draw away what no longer serves. Walking barefoot on grass, sitting in sunlight, listening to moving water, These are not idle pastimes but acts of deep recalibration. The natural world does not operate at the frantic pace of the human mind. It holds a steadier frequency. When you place yourself in its presence with humility, your own energy begins to match that steadiness. Over days and weeks, the static recedes, replaced by a grounded clarity that no plant, no smoke, no external trigger can replicate. Meditation, too, plays a central role in this process. In the absence of cannabis, the mind may initially feel restless, craving the ease of slipping into altered states without effort. This is where discipline meets grace. By sitting daily, even for short periods, and returning the attention again and again to breath or mantra, you retrain the pathways of the mind. What once depended on the plant begins to awaken naturally within you, and when those moments of stillness open, they are deeper, clearer, and more enduring than anything born from a haze. Forgiveness is another often overlooked aspect of spiritual detox. Many carry shame about their past use, especially if they feel it has clouded their path. This shame itself becomes another layer of heaviness that clings to the energy field. To forgive yourself is to acknowledge that every soul learns through experience, and that even the missteps can become medicine if they lead you toward awareness. You thank the plant for what it has taught you, even in misuse, and release it without resentment. In this way, the past becomes a stepping stone rather than a chain. There are also more formal spiritual practices that can aid in this cleansing. Sound healing, with gongs, singing bowls, or even the human voice, can dislodge stagnant energy through vibration. Smudging with sage, cedar, or palo santo can be used to sweep the auric field, each herb carrying its own cleansing signature. Chanting or intoning sacred syllables not only clears but recharges the energy body, replacing what has been removed with a higher frequency. Throughout this process, it is essential to remain conscious of what is being allowed back into your field. Detoxing the spirit is not just about removing residue from the past, but also about guarding against its reaccumulation. This means being mindful of environments, relationships, and habits that carry a heavy vibration. Just as the body thrives when nourished with clean food and water, the spirit thrives when nourished with beauty, kindness, and truth. In time, those who commit to this path often find that their energetic clarity becomes sharper than it was even before the misuse. The absence of the plant does not create emptiness, but reveals the immense, untapped reservoir of altered states within. Dreams become more vivid, intuition stronger, meditation deeper. The very things once sought through cannabis arise spontaneously, as if the soul has been waiting for the noise to quiet so it can finally speak. Spiritual detox is not about rejecting the plant or condemning its use. It is about restoring balance, returning the power of altered consciousness to the soul itself. When the fog lifts, you realize that the door you thought you needed help opening was never locked. You were the key all along, and now, in clarity, you can choose exactly where to step next. In the vision of a future where human consciousness has shifted into a higher frequency, the role of cannabis becomes more nuanced than it has ever been. In our current age, it is still a bridge for many, a way to step out of the density of everyday awareness and taste, if only briefly, the finer layers of existence. But in a society where higher states of consciousness are the natural resting point for most people, the need for such a bridge may change entirely. The plant may either take on a refined, sacred place in rare and intentional use, or fade into obsolescence as humanity no longer requires it to access what has become second nature. In the new consciousness era, the spiritual baseline is different. People live in a constant state of energetic coherence, their thoughts and emotions naturally harmonizing with the greater field. This is not because of rules or enforced discipline, but because the inner architecture of humanity has been rewired through generations of awakening. In such a state, the altered frequency that cannabis introduces might feel less like a lift and more like a distortion, like adding color to a painting that is already in perfect balance. This is not a judgment on the plant, but a reflection of the fact that when you live in daily communion with your higher self, tools designed to open that connection can become unnecessary. Still, there will likely be pockets within this evolved society that continue to honor cannabis in ceremonial contexts. It may be cultivated in pristine environments, untouched by synthetic alteration, and used in sacred gatherings to mark rites of passage, vision quests, or deep healing work for those transitioning between energetic phases of life. Here, cannabis is not an everyday aid but a rare, potent ally, approached with the same reverence given to ancient initiatory rituals. The plant's role would not be to introduce people to higher consciousness, but to magnify and anchor states they already inhabit, creating a container for profound shifts in awareness that are undertaken with the full consent of the soul. In this future, education around the plant would be entirely different. Children would be raised with an understanding of energy, vibration, and intention. They would learn not just about cannabis as a botanical species, but about the spirit of the plant and the way it interacts with human consciousness. Its use would not be a matter of rebellion or casual experimentation, but a conscious choice made in alignment with personal and collective evolution. In such a culture, misuse would be rare, not because it is forbidden, but because it simply no longer serves the soul's trajectory. However, there is another possible path. In some versions of the future, cannabis is left behind entirely, not because it is dangerous or forbidden, but because humanity's vibration has risen to the point where it no longer matches the plant's frequency. As the collective field of consciousness expands, there may be more refined energetic tools available, ways of shifting perception instantly through sound, light, breath, or direct neural resonance. In such a case, cannabis would be remembered fondly, perhaps even honored as a faithful ally from humanity's adolescent phase of awakening, but no longer actively used. It would be like an old key kept in a glass case, a reminder of the doors it once opened, but no longer necessary in a house where every room stands unlocked. One of the reasons cannabis might fade from use in such a future is that higher vibration societies rely less on external catalysts and more on the intrinsic capacities of the soul. Practices like telepathy, multidimensional perception, and instantaneous emotional clearing may be as natural as speaking or walking. In that context, the temporary shifts in perspective that cannabis offers could feel outdated, even clumsy, compared to the precision and clarity of unassisted spiritual states. This is not to say the plant loses its value, only that its purpose changes as the collective evolves. There is also the consideration of the planetary consciousness itself. In a future where humanity lives in harmony with the earth, plants are no longer exploited or overproduced for profit. The cultivation of cannabis would happen in direct relationship with the planet's needs, and if the Earth's own vibration shifts away from producing the plant in abundance, its availability may naturally decline. This would not be loss, but evolution, the planet and humanity adjusting together, each supporting the other's growth. For some, this idea may seem like a diminishment of cannabis's role. But in truth, it is the opposite. In higher vibration societies, nothing is used unconsciously. Every ally, plant, mineral, or energetic is approached with deep respect and clear intention. In that way, the plant is elevated beyond its current associations and restored to its role as a sacred being. Whether it continues to be used or not, its spirit is acknowledged as part of the great web of life that carried humanity through its awakening. It is also possible that in the new consciousness era, cannabis will be understood in ways we cannot yet imagine. Advanced perception may reveal aspects of the plant's energy that are currently invisible to us, higher harmonics of its vibration that could be tuned in precise ways to work with specific chakras, emotional states, or even planetary alignments. Rather than being used for generalized altered states, it might become part of highly specialized spiritual work, like a fine instrument played only by those trained to handle its resonance with skill. The key to its place in the future lies in the relationship humanity chooses to have with it now. If cannabis continues to be used primarily for escapism and unconscious indulgence, it may have no place in a society built on clarity, presence, and responsibility. But if its use becomes more intentional, aligned with healing, creativity, and authentic spiritual work, it could retain a place of honor in the evolving human story. The seeds of that future are planted in the choices being made right now. Perhaps the most profound truth is that the fate of cannabis in the new consciousness era is inseparable from the fate of humanity itself. The plant is a mirror, reflecting the level of awareness we bring to it. In times of ignorance, it becomes a fog. In times of awakening, it becomes a torch. In times of mastery, it may be set down altogether, not from rejection but from completion. A recognition that the doorway it guarded is now wide open, and we have learned to walk through it on our own. In that light, the plant's highest role may be as a transitional ally, guiding humanity from a fragmented, disconnected state into a unified, conscious existence. And when that work is done, it will be remembered with gratitude, not for what it gave us, but for what it helped us remember was within us all along. Whether it remains in our hands or rests in the earth, its spirit will continue to weave through the story of our evolution, a green thread in the great tapestry of awakening, visible to all who have eyes to see. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the question of tools and aids falls away, and the only thing left is the raw, unfiltered truth of your own connection to the divine. Cannabis, like countless other plant allies throughout human history, can serve as a bridge to moments of insight and expansion. It can show you what lies beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception, giving you glimpses of the infinite and the mysterious. But there is a difference between being shown the view from a mountaintop and learning how to climb there yourself. Sooner or later, every soul must discover that the summit was never dependent on what you carried in your hand, but on the strength and clarity you cultivated in your being. The beauty of working with a plant like cannabis is that it can awaken a sense of possibility, a realization that there is more to this reality than what your senses normally perceive. In its highest use, it can be a gentle teacher, reminding you that your mind is more expansive than you've been led to believe, that the veil between worlds is thinner than it appears. But the danger is in forgetting that the plant is only ever pointing to something you already hold. When the pointer becomes the focus, the truth it indicated starts to fade into the background, and the tool becomes a substitute for the very thing it was meant to reveal. The soul's connection to the divine is not dependent on any substance, ritual, or external condition. It exists in the quiet space within you that no one can alter or take away. When you sit in stillness and listen, when you breathe into your heart and feel the subtle hum of your own existence, you are touching that connection directly. Cannabis may help some people quiet the mind enough to notice it, but it is not the source of the connection itself. Believing that it is can lead to a kind of spiritual dependency, where the plant becomes a gatekeeper rather than an ally. The truth is, your soul remembers the way home without maps, without guides, without props. It knows the frequency of love, the resonance of truth, and the warmth of presence as intimately as you know the feel of your own skin. No plant, however sacred, can replace that knowing. At best, it can remind you of it, give you a momentary lift to rise above the noise of the world and glimpse the horizon. But the work, the real work, is learning how to find that horizon from wherever you stand, no matter the conditions. In many ways, the highest gift any plant ally can give you is its own release. It can carry you for a time, help you see a little further, feel a little deeper, trust a little more. But there comes a day when you set it down, not from rejection, but from gratitude. You set it down because you no longer need it to access what it once revealed to you. You have integrated its lessons into your own being, woven them into your own consciousness, and now the doorway it once opened is one you can step through at will. This is the graduation of the soul beyond the smoke, the moment you realize you were never bound by it to begin with. It is tempting to think that, without certain tools, our spiritual experiences will diminish, that the vividness of our visions, the depth of our meditations, or the clarity of our insights will fade. But the opposite is often true. When you no longer rely on something external to shift your awareness, you begin to discover the immense, untapped reservoirs of perception within you. You learn how to alter your own frequency with breath, with focus, with intention. You realize that the veil can be lifted at any moment, simply by choosing to see differently, to feel differently, to be differently. This is the kind of mastery no plant can grant you. It must be claimed by your own willingness to evolve. There is also a deeper kind of freedom in moving beyond dependency. When your connection to the divine is unconditional, you are not limited by access, by legality, by supply, or by circumstance. It is always with you, in every moment, in every place. You can touch the infinite in the middle of a crowded street, in the silence of a forest, in the laughter of a friend, or in the stillness before sleep. You become a living temple, and your life becomes the ritual. The plant, in this sense, has fulfilled its highest role, not by being present in every ceremony, but by teaching you that every breath can be a ceremony without it. This is not to diminish the sacredness of cannabis, or to erase the profound ways it has aided countless seekers. Its spirit has walked with humanity for thousands of years, woven into our myths, our medicine, and our moments of awakening. But the soul's evolution is not about clinging to any one ally forever. It is about honoring the allies that come, receiving their gifts fully, and then walking forward with the wisdom they helped you uncover. The plant does not need to be with you for its teaching to remain alive in you. And so, the soul beyond the smoke is not a rejection of the plant's value, but an expansion into the fullness of your own. It is the realization that your awakening was never contained in a leaf, a flame, or a breath of vapor. It was always in you, waiting for the moment when you would trust it enough to stand without support. The plant may have been a friend along the way, but the path was yours to walk, and the destination was always within you. In the end, every tool, every ritual, every ally is there to lead you back to yourself. And when you arrive, when you stand in the clear light of your own consciousness, free and unbound, you see the truth that every seeker eventually learns. The divine was never something you had to reach for. It was the ground beneath your feet, the air in your lungs, the quiet in your heart, and the spark in your soul. The plant simply helped you remember, and once you remember, you are free.